The snow fell quietly on Fifth Avenue as Jonathan Mrs. Blake stepped out of his evening business meeting. At 37, he'd grown accustomed to these late nights, the endless negotiations that built his commercial development empire. His dark hair was touched with early flecks of silver, his tailored black coat a shield against both the cold and the world. Success had come early for Jonathan, but it had cost him something he was only beginning to understand he'd lost. He was reaching for his phone to call his driver when he heard a small voice barely audible above the whisper of falling snow. "Excuse me, sir." Jonathan looked down to find a little girl standing on the sidewalk, no more than 4 years old. She had reddish blonde curls escaping from beneath a worn knit cap, her cheeks pink from the cold. She wore a puffy beige coat that had seen better days, a red dress visible beneath it, and small boots that were slightly too large. A green backpack hung from her tiny shoulders, and her blue eyes were wide with an emotion Jonathan recognized immediately as fear. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" he asked, crouching down to her level. The sidewalk was cold beneath his knees, dampness seeping through his expensive trousers, but he didn't notice. The little girl nodded slowly, her lower lip trembling. "I can't wake up my mom." The words hit Jonathan like a physical blow. "What do you mean you can't wake her up? Where is she?" "At home. I tried and tried, but she won't open her eyes. She's on the floor by the couch." Tears began sliding down the child's round cheeks. "I got scared. I remembered," she said. "If there's ever an emergency, go find help. So I put on my coat and came outside, but everyone just walks past me." Jonathan's mind raced, years of executive decision-making kicking into focus. "What's your name, honey?" "Sophia. Sophia Martinez." "Okay, Sophia. I'm Jonathan. Can you show me where you live? Can you take me to your mom?" The little girl nodded, reaching up to take his hand with a trust that made Jonathan's chest tighten. Her small fingers were cold, even through her mittens. She led him down the street around a corner and into a neighborhood that grew progressively shabbier. The elegant storefronts gave way to older buildings, some with broken windows, others with sagging steps. They stopped in front of a narrow brownstone that had been divided into apartments. Sophia pulled a key on a string from inside her coat, her fingers fumbling with the lock. Jonathan helped her, his hands steady despite the fear coursing through him. They climbed 2 flights of stairs, the wallpaper peeling, the carpet threadbare. Sophia's apartment was tiny, maybe 500 square feet total, but it was clean, Jonathan noticed, decorated with obvious care. Children's drawings covered one wall held up with colorful tape. A small Christmas tree sat in the corner, handmade ornaments hanging from its branches. And there, just as Sophia had said, a woman lay motionless on the floor beside the couch. Jonathan rushed to her side, his fingers finding her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint but steady. The woman was young, maybe 30, with light brown hair pulled back in a braid. Even unconscious, Jonathan could see the delicate features, the exhaustion etched into her face. Her skin was pale, too pale, and when he touched her forehead, it burned with fever. "Sophia, I need to call for help." "Okay." Jonathan pulled out his phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. As he relayed the address to the dispatcher, he noticed the details of the room. A stack of medical bills on the small table, all marked past due in red. An empty prescription bottle on the counter. A calendar on the wall with shift schedules written in careful handwriting. Double shifts marked in red. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Jonathan stood back holding Sophia, who had buried her face in his coat. The little girl was trembling now, silent tears soaking through the expensive fabric. He rubbed her back gently, whispering reassurances he wasn't sure he believed. "Is she diabetic?" one of the paramedics asked, checking the woman's vital signs. "I don't know," Jonathan admitted. "I just found her." "Found her? Are you family?" "No, my daughter came to get me." It sounded absurd, explaining how a 4-year-old had walked through a snowstorm to find a stranger, but the paramedic just nodded, focused on his patient. They loaded the woman, Sophia's mother, onto a stretcher. "We're taking her to St. Mary's." The lead paramedic told Jonathan, "She's in diabetic shock. Looks like she's been sick, and couldn't keep her medication down. She's lucky the little one knew to get help." At the hospital, Jonathan found himself in an uncomfortable plastic chair in the emergency room waiting area, still holding Sophia. The little girl had finally stopped crying, but she refused to let go of his hand. A nurse had brought her a juice box and some crackers, which she nibbled on mechanically. "Do you have any other family?" Jonathan asked gently. "Grandparents? An aunt or uncle?" Sophia shook her head. "Just mommy. My daddy went away before I was born." Mommy says he wasn't ready to be a daddy. Jonathan felt something crack open inside his chest. This child, this brave little girl who'd walked into the snow to save her mother, was completely alone in the world, except for the woman fighting for her life. Behind those emergency room doors, a social worker appeared. A tired-looking woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. "I'm Mrs. Patterson," she said softly. "Sophia, honey, can you tell me what happened tonight?" As Sophia recounted the story in her small, halting voice, Jonathan learned more. Her mother, Rebecca Martinez, worked as a night nurse at a care facility across town. She'd been battling the flu for days, but couldn't afford to miss work. This evening, after coming home from a double shift, she'd collapsed. Sophia had tried everything she could think of, had even brought her mother water and the phone, but Rebecca hadn't woken up. "I'll need to place Sophia in temporary foster care until her mother recovers," Mrs. Patterson said quietly to Jonathan. "There's no other family." And no, the word came out more forcefully than Jonathan intended. He softened his tone. "I mean, isn't there another option? I'll stay with her, or she could come with me. I can't just you can't just send her off with strangers right now." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Blake, I appreciate your concern, but we have procedures. You're not family. You're not even an acquaintance. The state has protocols for situations like this. Then I'll hire lawyers who can challenge those protocols." Jonathan was surprised by the intensity of his own reaction. This child just saved her mother's life. By being brave enough to ask a stranger for help, I'm not going to let her be traumatized. Further, by being taken from the one place she feels safe, which right now happens to be with me. The social worker studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Let me make some calls." 2 hours later, through a combination of Jonathan's reputation, his lawyers working overtime, and the unusual circumstances, a temporary arrangement was made. Jonathan would be Sophia's guardian until Rebecca recovered. With daily check-ins from social services, it was highly irregular, the social worker emphasized. But given that it was now nearly midnight and Sophia had been through enough trauma for one night, they'd make an exception. "Can we see my mommy first?" Sophia asked, her small voice breaking the tension. They were allowed into Rebecca's room for a few minutes. She was awake now, though barely hooked up to IVs and monitors. When she saw Sophia, tears streamed down her face. "Baby, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You were so brave. So brave." "This is Mr. Jonathan," Sophia announced. "I found him on the street, and he helped us. He's going to take care of me until you get better." Rebecca's eyes met Jonathan's over her daughter's head. In them he saw gratitude, yes, but also fear and shame, and a fierce protective love that reminded him of his own mother, gone now for 10 years. "I'll keep her safe," Jonathan promised quietly. "I'll bring her to visit every day. You focus on getting well." Rebecca reached out a shaking hand, and Jonathan took it. Her grip was weak, but her gaze was strong. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you." Jonathan didn't fully understand it himself. All he knew was that when Sophia had taken his hand on that snowy sidewalk, something had shifted inside him. Some long, dormant part of his heart had woken up. The part he'd shut down after his own family had fallen apart, after he'd thrown himself into work to avoid feeling anything at all. That night, Jonathan's penthouse apartment, Jidak, which had always seemed sophisticatedly minimalist, felt cavernous and cold with a 4-year-old inside it. Sophia stood in the center of the living room, her small backpack still on her shoulders, looking lost. "Are you hungry?" Jonathan asked, realizing he had no idea what 4-year-olds ate. His refrigerator contained leftover Thai food, some craft beer, and a questionable container of yogurt. Sophia shook her head. "I'm sleepy, but I don't have my bed. We'll figure something out. Come on." He led her to his guest room, which was decorated in stark whites and grays, clearly meant for adult visitors who never came. Sophia looked at the massive bed, then back at Jonathan. "It's too big," she said simply. "I'll get lost." Jonathan thought for a moment, then gathered pillows and blankets from a closet. On the floor beside the bed, he built a kind of nest, a smaller, cozier space. Sophia crawled into it gratefully. "Mr. Jonathan," she said as he was turning to leave. "You can just call me Jonathan. Jonathan, will you stay until I fall asleep? I get scared in new places." He settled onto the floor beside her makeshift bed, his back against the wall. Sophia reached out and took his hand again, and they sat there in the dim light from the hallway. "My mommy sings to me," Sophia said quietly. "But I know you probably don't know the songs." Jonathan's throat tightened. His own mother had sung to him years ago before the cancer took her. He'd forgotten that or tried to. "I might know a few," he said softly, and began to hum an old lullaby. Words he didn't know he still remembered coming back to him. Sophia was asleep within minutes, her breathing soft and even, but Jonathan stayed there holding her small hand, watching this brave little girl who'd walked through a snowstorm to save her mother. He thought about his own life, about the corners of glass and steel he'd built around himself, about the years he'd spent accumulating success while losing touch with everything that made life meaningful. The next morning, Jonathan called his assistant and cleared his schedule. Then he took Sophia shopping, a surreal experience that involved learning what size clothing 4-year-olds wore, what foods they liked, what kind of toothbrush made brushing teeth less of a battle. Sophia helped, patiently explaining things to him as if he were the child. They visited Rebecca every day. Slowly, color returned to her face, strength to her voice. The doctor said she'd been pushing herself too hard for too long, that her body had simply given out. She needed rest, proper nutrition, and to actually take her medication regularly instead of rationing it to save money. During those visits, Jonathan learned Rebecca's story. She'd been a nursing student when she got pregnant. The father, a fellow student, had vanished immediately. Rebecca had dropped out to work, planning to return to school once Sophia was older, but that day never seemed to come. Every dollar went to rent, food, childcare. She worked doubles and triples, slept 4 hours a night, and still could barely make ends meet. "I try so hard," she told Jonathan one afternoon, tears in her eyes. "I want to give her everything, dance classes and nice clothes, and the books she loves, but there's never enough." Jonathan found himself telling her about his own mother, about growing up in a small apartment not unlike hers, about watching his mother work herself to exhaustion to give him opportunities. "She'd be proud of you," he said quietly. "You're doing what she did. You're putting your child first always. That's everything." On the 5th day, as Rebecca was being discharged, Jonathan made a decision. He'd spent those 5 days living with Sophia, taking her to preschool, reading her bedtime stories, learning to make the dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets she loved. He'd rearranged his life around nap times and snacks, and the surprisingly complex social dynamics of 4-year-old friendships, and he'd felt more alive than he had in years. "I have a proposition," he told Rebecca as she packed up her hospital room. "And I need you to hear me out before you say no." Rebecca looked wary, but nodded. "I have a property, a building I've been holding as an investment. It's in a good neighborhood, good schools. There's an apartment there, 3 bedrooms that's been sitting empty. I'd like you and Sophia to live there. No rent. I can't possibly, I'm not finished." Jonathan held up a hand gently. "I'd also like to offer you a job. I need someone to manage the building, handle tenant relations, coordinate maintenance. It's flexible hours, mostly from home. It pays enough that you could work 1 job instead of 3, and still put money away. And it comes with health insurance." Rebecca was shaking her head, but Jonathan pressed on. "Here's the thing, Rebecca. Sophia saved your life that night, but I think maybe she saved mine too. I've spent 10 years building a company, and forgetting how to be a person these last 5 days. Watching her draw pictures, listening to her talk about her day at school, helping her brush her teeth. It's reminded me what actually matters. I'm not offering charity, I'm offering a chance for all of us to have something better." "Why?" Rebecca whispered. "Why would you do all this?" Jonathan thought about that small hand taking his on a snowy sidewalk, about the trust in those blue eyes, about a little girl brave enough to walk into the dark to save her mother. He thought about his own mother, about chances given and received, about the way life sometimes offers unexpected redemption. "Because I can," he said simply. "Because you're raising an incredible human being who deserves stability and safety. Because I have more than I need, and you need more than you have, and that seems like something we should fix." And because he paused, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. "Because I'd like to be part of your lives if you'll let me. Not as charity. As friends, as family, maybe the kind you choose." Rebecca was crying now, and Jonathan handed her a tissue, giving her time. Finally she spoke. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, but on one condition. You let me pay rent even if it's minimal. And you let me earn this job, not just hand it to me. I need to know I'm contributing, that I'm not just someone's project." "Deal," Jonathan agreed. "Though, I should warn you, Sophia's already informed me that I'm required to attend her dance recital next month. Apparently, I'm family now, whether I agreed to it or not." Rebecca laughed through her tears. "She has a way of deciding these things." 3 months later, Jonathan sat in a folding chair in an elementary school gymnasium, watching 4-year-olds in various states of controlled chaos perform a dance routine. Sophia, in a sparkly blue costume, waved enthusiastically when she spotted him. Beside him, Rebecca squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for being there that night, for caring." Jonathan squeezed back. "Thank you for raising someone brave enough to ask a stranger for help, for teaching her that the world can be good, even when it's hard." On the stage, Sophia spun in slightly the wrong direction, crashed into another dancer, then giggled and kept going. Jonathan felt his heart swell with an affection he hadn't known he was capable of anymore. His phone buzzed with work emails, negotiations that needed his attention, deals that required his focus. He glanced at them, then turned the phone face down. The deals could wait. This moment, this little girl who'd changed his life with 5 simple words, this makeshift family he'd found in the snow, this was what mattered. Later, driving Rebecca and Sophia back to their apartment, with Sophia chattering about her performance and Rebecca laughing at her daughter's enthusiasm, Jonathan understood something fundamental. Success wasn't measured in buildings owned or deals closed. It was measured in small hands trusting yours, in the privilege of being present for ordinary miracles, in the choice to show up and care even when it wasn't convenient or expected. "Sir, my mom didn't wake up." Sophia had said that snowy night, and in asking for help, she'd offered it. She'd reminded a man who'd forgotten how to feel that hearts could still crack open, that walls could still come down, that it was never too late to build something real. The snow was falling again as they pulled up to the building, soft and quiet. Sophia pressed her face to the window, watching the flakes dance in the street light. "It's like that night," she said. "The night I found you, Jonathan." "No, sweetheart," he said softly, meeting Rebecca's eyes in the rear-view mirror. "That was the night you both found me." And in that moment, with snow falling and a child's laughter filling the car, and a future spreading out before them, full of ordinary days and extraordinary love, Jonathan Blake finally understood what it meant to be truly wealthy.